Good evening, panelists. Today we convene to discuss India's Immigration and Foreigners Bill 2025. A transformative piece of legislation, I would say, poised to reshape the nation's immigration framework. It was introduced and tabled in March 2025. The bill seeks to sort of modernize and consolidate outdated colonial era laws. Before moving on to something which can be quite critical, let's just take this as a fact that the government currently makes everything work so similar because it's colonial era. Streamline visa processes and bolsters national security while aligning to India's economic ambitions and global aspirations. So this is what we are going to discuss today. On panel, we have Anubhi and Anne, who are going to be answering the questions which are posed to them. So before moving forward to the question itself, let me just, give you an idea, a sort of like, more like depth information about it. So the whole bill in itself, it just talks about, takes into consideration the rationale, the legislative intent to a certain extent, where you go ahead and discuss about why was it brought in. So there are quite a lot of thought-provoking ideas which goes ahead, like balancing security and openness would be one of the ideas, like how is India strengthening the border control without deterring the legitimate travels to enter the country. There are also economic opportunities, of course, and bureaucratic challenges because, if you see how India, how strong India is with the passport index, it's quite weak. So India wants to bring in a change globally to include themselves into the global leaders. Apart from that, we also discussed the social and humanitarian impacts. There are penalties for illegal immigrants. India wants to be out there, be a very welcoming country, also deters people who are illegal. Also, as we move forward to this technological era, we also see how AI is playing a role. So we'll come to that as well. So let's just get started with the roundtable. So the first question I would like to ask, which Anubhi would be answering, is how effectively does the bill balance national security imperatives with the need to maintain India's image as an open and welcoming global hub?
Thank you so much. So, firstly, I would like to set the floor by saying that broadly, we can say that this bill has three major objectives. As very rightly said, modernization of the immigration laws. This bill is actually replacing four colonial era acts. And then we have national security and we have compliance and accountability. These are the three primary objectives that we see. Now, when I talk about the modernization of immigration law, we see that digital tracking, biometric verification, as well as a centralized Bureau of Immigration has been implemented with this bill, is proposed with this bill. There is an attempt to set up or bring in policies in line with international standards. It could be considered a shift to a more centralized structure and transparent system. But on the other hand, this might also lead to increased delays, red taping, administrative backlogs, and something similar that we've already seen with the implementation of Aadhaar and stuff like that. But also with the centralizing visa process delays in the US. However, there's also one more key factor that I want to bring into the table today is that in India, with the diversity we have, not all of our borders share the same issue. By creating a one-size-fits-all policy, it might overlook the historical and demographic differences, and it might also limit the state government's ability to adapt immigration policies that actually fit these regional needs. Right? Like these problems are faced in Assam and West Bengal especially. Now, when it comes to national security, this bill is implementing a strict visa screening to prevent illegal immigration, human trafficking, as well as terrorist infiltration. But it has also increased penalties. Now, the real question is, does India have the resources and the technology to get up with this? Then, when we come to compliance and accountability, the bill is mandating foreign nationals to register upon arrival with institutions, whether they are hotels, universities, or hospitals. They need to report foreign residents. It also includes harsher fines and deportation policies for those violating visa conditions, right? Those overstaying their visa can face fines up to 10 lakhs. So here we again see an increase in surveillance, an increase in tracking, an increase in fines. So this again raises concerns about data privacy, misuse of personal information, and especially because there's an absence of robust data protection laws in India. So overall, to answer your question, it might be a step forward, but there's a lot that we need to achieve to go there first.
Great points, Anubi, especially the one where you discussed about the geographical, and the historical context of India. We cannot actually keep India so restricted within a law where you itself call it so asymmetric. Definitely, it brings in stringent measures and it can deter legitimate travelers as well. Great points. Now we'll move on to the second question for the day. That is, will the proposed streamlining of visa processes and digital infrastructure genuinely enhances ease of doing business? Or could new compliance requirements create unintended barriers? Now, because Anubhi, you have been talking about these barriers, I would like you to answer the question.
So what we've actually seen with every time there's an immigration policy change or there is a closing or opening of borders, it is it automatically impacts the economy, right? Because it's not only about whether a person can freely move within. There are new compliances with which both embassies or which both states have to follow. I hope I'm making sense when I say this, right? I feel that with increased compliance there'll be a huge problem that India faces. Currently we have more people shifting out of India rather than shifting in India. It has been a trend with countries that have low HDI, Human Development Index, that people shift out, right? And with increased bureaucratic hurdles, it might even further disencourage foreign investors to invest in India, because sometimes when you need to transfer people, you want to set up MNCs, you need relaxed laws or you need a government that supports you, right? uh, I am expecting that it will cause a direct impact to the tourism and hospitality business, because if we are in with the new change, with the new shift to AI, people do not necessarily have access to this, and visa approvals might take longer, rejections might increase. So I feel like, just to sum up what I've already not what I've been trying to say in both of these questions, is that it is definitely gonna impact. It is definitely gonna face a lot of push, pull, and hurdles. But it is important that we strike a balance. It is all about how much we as a country, what are we prioritizing. We have to balance security concerns with economic growth in this case, because we have to retain skilled professionals while also attracting global talent.
Good points. One being very essential is, of course, ease of doing business requires liberalization. And when you bring in so many laws, you bring in so many legislations, they actually curb that. One more point which I would like is like, well, of course, we know how implementation of policies happens in India. There are certain small organizations which would like to come into India, but then they'll be restricted because of the fact that the whole process of implementation of policies in India has been so rudimentary, and they have been completely going through such a tacky process, not allowing, and so corrupt of practices that India has been filled with for the past. If you see the historical things with the laws. Um, uh, Good answer. So we'll move on to the third question, which talks about how does the bill address the needs of vulnerable population such as refugees and asylum seekers, and does it align with India's humanitarian obligations? And would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Rufaid. So the bill is primarily focused on, as both Anubi and Rufaid have said, the regulation of entry and exit of foreigners through a security centric lens. It provides a lot of mechanisms for surveillance, detention, deportation. But what it doesn't do is provide any statutory recognition or differentiated procedures as a few of the other older laws did for vulnerable populations, such as refugees, asylum seekers, stateless persons, climate migrants, etc. This is significant because India hosts a lot of large refugee populations from a lot of neighboring countries, from Tibet, Sri Lanka, the Rohingya population, the Afghan population. And in the absence of this formal asylum policy or refugee law, their legal status remains discretionary under this new bill, especially with how they have failed to define these terms. And with respect to India's humanitarian obligations, India is not a party to the 1951 Refugee Convention, nor the 1967 Protocol. But however, under customary international law, it there is the principle of non-refoulement, which is to not send a person back to a place where they face threats to life or freedom. They are signatories to the ICCPR and the conventions on the rights of children. So the bill doesn't explicitly incorporate any of these obligations. And the absence of these protections or any asylum determination mechanism then opens the door to what we see as arbitrary detention and deportation of vulnerable populations, which violate both India's de facto practices and its obligations under international humanitarian rights law.
Great point, and also the fact that as you mentioned, that India is not a party to the 1951 Refugee Convention. It also brings into the point whether India would be bringing in something to protect the vulnerables in the bill. Good point. It would be sort of a follow-up to ask you a question another, because as we're moving forward from refugee, we also talk about AI, because artificial intelligence has been used by a lot of countries, especially the US, to curb illegal immigrants. So the question is, can the bill's reliance on technology such as AI-driven verification and digital platform ensure inclusivity, or will it deepen inequities of marginalized communities, as you discussed about Rohingyas? In itself, India, the government we have right now, they have a specific stance they've taken against Rohingyas, or they've taken against certain communities. So, do you think AI as a technological platform be used to curb their rights, or AI can help them in a more legal sense? What's your take?
So I think to answer that question, let's first talk about what all this bill promises to do in the field of technology. It envisions a digitally integrated immigration system with centralized databases, AI based verification, digital visa tracking, automated risk assessment tools. And at the outset of it, ideally, these systems can improve efficiency and transparency. It can also reduce human discretion, human bias, and enable a real time interagency coordination to reduce that gap in time that, as Anubi said, there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape. And this technology was, or rather is, supposed to bring in a way to stop all of these issues coming in. Now, but also we have to look at how technology is not neutral. Tech AI in of itself is something that's trained, right? And the training material is biased. As Rafed said, we know what the government stance is on certain refugee communities. And eventually, what happens is that these stances are the ones that are going into training these artificial intelligence technologies. And these AI systems then reflect and amplify existing social biases. Facial recognition biometric systems have been shown to globally underperform for darker skinned individuals and for women. And AI can also be used to flag what the government calls risky individuals without any explanation or human review. And it could then result in profiling or unjustified exclusion. This then also brings me to the point of a digital divide. And as we see in India, there's a huge, stark inequality with digital literacy, internet access, documentation. And this leads to disenfranchisement where ineligible individuals are then denied access or protection due to these technological barriers. Rural migrants, informal workers, refugees, indigenous communities, they lack the digital fluency or resources to engage with these complex online systems. Then we have the issue of data privacy, of surveillance. The bill does not provide any adequate data protection safeguards, and sensitive personal data like biometrics, travel history, visa information, all of these can then be used for mass surveillance that is shared across agencies without consent or transparency. We do have a we do have a data protection law, but how robust is it that it can help in terms of these oversights and the use of digital platforms that could easily turn into a tool of control rather than facilitation? And it's also important to note that redressal mechanisms are practically inaccessible. And the bill is currently silent on any appeal mechanisms or algorithmic accountability that put affected people in what we see as a legal vacuum.
Great points, and especially when you discussed about how there could be a disparity, which can be brought in by the AI. Definitely, it can create discrimination. It can be used as a tool for discrimination. It could be on any account, and we have seen that happening wherever what all countries have been using the AI. It can actually cause a greater impact onto people who have less resources because of the corrupt practice of the government or the intended motives of the government. Here we come to the end of this debate, and well, definitely the questions sparked a nuanced debate, and we discussed the bill's operationality, we discussed it on ethical grounds, we discussed it on geopolitical dimensions, and multiple other fronts. And I would like to thank our panelists, Anubi and Anne, for bringing such insightful points on the table. This is all for today. Thank you.